My name is Evelyn Turner, and I exist in the spaces between words. Here in the cotton fields of East Texas, where the red earth stains everything it touches, I have learned that silence is not weakness. It is strategy. The year is 1851, and I am 23 years old, though I stopped counting birthdays the day I understood what it meant to be property. Master Calloway's plantation stretches across this land like a scar that refuses to heal, 500 acres of cotton and cruelty, and I work his fields from dawn until my hands bleed into the white bowls. The cotton drinks my blood, and no one notices. That is how it works here. We bleed, and the world grows richer, and no one speaks of it. I learned young that speaking brings attention, and attention brings pain. My mother taught me this before she was sold away when I was 9 years old. I can still see her face on that last morning, the way she gripped my shoulders and looked into my eyes with an intensity that burned. Her last words to me were not goodbye. They were not "I love you," though I knew she did. They were, "Be small, Evelyn. Be quiet, live." 3 commands that became my gospel, my survival manual, my daily prayer. I have kept that promise for 14 years. I move through the plantation like smoke, present but unnoticed, useful but invisible. I do not need eyes. I do not raise my voice above a whisper. When Master Calloway walks past with his silver-topped cane and his cologne that smells of tobacco and mint, I make myself into nothing, just another pair of hands, another bent back, another tool he owns and uses and forgets. The overseer, Mr. Gaines, is a different kind of devil. He is young, perhaps 30, with pale eyes that see everything and forgive nothing. He likes the ones who talk back. He likes the ones who show fire, because fire gives him an excuse to extinguish it publicly, violently, as a lesson to the rest of us. I have watched him break 3 women who dared to be seen, who dared to speak their minds or move too slowly or look at him wrong. I watched him whip Clara until she couldn't stand, all because she said yes instead of yes, sir, one morning when he asked if she'd finished the chicken coop. I watched him sell Mary's children as punishment when she refused his advances in the barn. I watched him destroy Bess simply because she was too beautiful, and he wanted to own even that. I have learned from their suffering. I keep my fire buried so deep that sometimes, in the darkest hours of night, I wonder if it has gone out entirely, if there is anything left inside me that is truly Evelyn, or if I am just the hollow shape of a woman, animated by survival instinct alone. At night, in the cabin I share with 7 others, I lie on my thin pallet stuffed with corn husks and listen to the sounds of exhausted breathing, the coughs that speak of lung sickness, the whimpers of children too tired to cry properly. We sleep pressed together for warmth, our bodies thin and aching, our dreams, when we have them, filled with food and rest and sometimes, dangerously, freedom. I think about my mother every single night. I wonder where she is now. If she ended up on a sugar plantation in Louisiana as we feared, if she survived the journey south in chains, if she still remembers my face, or if she has forced herself to forget me to survive her own grief. I think about my father, who I never knew, sold before I was born to a trader heading west. I am the child of 2 people who loved each other in stolen moments, and I am the evidence of that love scattered across this country like seeds in barren ground. I think about the baby I lost last winter, born too early, too small, too fragile for this world. She came 2 months before her time, after Mr. Gaines shoved me against the barn wall for moving too slowly with a water bucket. I felt something tear inside me, felt the warm rush of blood, and I knew. I labored alone in the cabin while the others worked, birthed a tiny girl who never drew breath, and buried her myself in the woods beyond the quarters when darkness fell. No one acknowledged that child. No one said a word. Master Calloway docked my rations for missing a day of work. I buried my grief as deep as I buried my anger, wrapped it in silence and forced it down, and I survived. This is what the title means. I learned to survive quietly. Not because I am weak or docile or broken, but because I am calculating every single moment. The injustices accumulate like cotton in a sack, each one adding weight until you forget what it felt like to stand upright, until the bent posture becomes natural and you cannot remember your spine ever being straight. Master Calloway is not the worst master in Texas. I have heard stories of worse from the traders who passed through, tales of torture and murder that make my stomach clench. But that does not make him good. It makes him careful. It makes him smart. He does not scar faces where buyers might see. He does not break bones that will affect our work. He does not kill us outright because dead slaves bring no profit. He keeps his property valuable, maintained, functional. We are tools to him, and he maintains his tools the way a farmer maintains his plow, with enough care to keep us working, but no more than that. His wife, Mrs. Sarah Calloway, is worse in her own way, though she would never see it that way. She moves through the big house with her pressed dresses that rustle when she walks, her blonde hair always perfectly arranged, her prayer book always in hand, speaking softly about Christian duty and the burden of civilizing the African race, while her kitchen girl, Liza, works with fresh welts across her back from yesterday's discipline. Mrs. Sarah does not like when we look too long at her children, 2 boys and a girl with their father's sharp features and their mother's blue eyes. She does not like when we exist too fully in her presence, when we show personality or preference or opinion. She wants us to be ghosts, useful when needed, invisible when not, silent always. She has never hit me herself. Her hands stay clean. But she has ordered punishments for infractions so small they barely existed. A plate not dried thoroughly enough, a curtain hung slightly crooked, a tone of voice she deemed insolent, though the words themselves were perfectly obedient. Her cruelty is administrative, bureaucratic, sanctioned by her reading of scripture that tells her slavery is ordained by God, and she is fulfilling a holy purpose. I work primarily in the fields, which means I am spared the intimate cruelties of the house, the constant surveillance, the proximity to the family's daily life. But I am not spared the overseer. Mr. Gaines carries a whip and uses it liberally, and his eyes follow the younger women with a hunger that makes my stomach turn and my fists clench in hidden fury. I am not young anymore by his standards. Not at 23. Not after bearing a child. Not after 6 years of field work that has weathered my skin like leather and hardened my body into something more rope than flesh. This saves me from the worst of his attention, from the visits to the barn that leave girls like Ruth broken in ways that never fully heal. But it does not save me from his violence when I move too slowly or fail to meet his quotas or simply exist in his sight on a day when he is angry about something else entirely. Last month, he whipped Samuel for singing while he worked. The song was an old one, about Moses leading his people out of bondage, about rivers to cross and mountains to climb and freedom on the other shore. We all know these songs. We sing them in the quarters at night, our voices low and careful, encoding our hopes in biblical language that the masters cannot quite condemn because it comes from their own book. But Samuel sang it in the field, loud and clear, his voice rising above the sound of hands in cotton, and Mr. Gaines said it was insurrection, said it was inciting rebellion, said it was forbidden. Samuel took 20 lashes and did not cry out once. He stood tied to the whipping post with his face pressed against the wood, and he took every strike in silence. And when it was over and they cut him down, he walked back to his row and continued picking cotton with blood soaking through his shirt. I watched from 3 rows over, my hands never stopping their motion through the cotton bolls, my face revealing nothing, my eyes fixed on my work. Inside, I screamed, Inside, I raged. Inside, I imagined taking that whip and wrapping it around Mr. Gaines's throat until his pale eyes bulged and his face turned purple. But outside, I was quiet, perfectly controlled, invisible in my obedience. And I survived another day. The memories press against my silence like water against a dam. Constant pressure that threatens to break through if I let my concentration slip for even a moment. I remember my mother's hands braiding my hair in the mornings before dawn, her fingers quick and gentle, weaving 3 strands into patterns that she said came from Africa, from a place and people I will never know. I remember the songs she sang, the same songs Samuel now bleeds for singing, words about Jordan River and Promised Land and chariots coming to carry us home. I remember being small enough to believe that if I was good enough, obedient enough, quiet enough, sweet enough, I might be loved instead of owned. That is perhaps the cruelest lesson of childhood here, learning that no amount of goodness will ever make you human in their eyes, that you can be perfect in every way and still be property, still be less than the horses in the stable or the dogs that sleep at their feet. I remember the day they took my mother. A trader came from Louisiana with money and a wagon, and Master Calloway, younger then, newly married, deeply in debt from buying this land, accepted the offer without hesitation. My mother was 31 years old, strong, healthy, experienced in field work and housework both. Valuable. They took her in the morning, just after breakfast. She had time to pull me aside, to give me those 3 commands, to press her forehead against mine for one brief moment. Then she was gone, chained to 6 other people in the back of a wagon, heading south on the dusty road. I watched until I couldn't see her anymore, and then I went to the field and picked cotton, and I did not cry, and I learned the first real lesson about surviving quietly. You cannot afford to feel everything, or you will not survive at all. I remember the first time I understood what Mr. Gaines wanted from girls like me. I was 15, still developing, still naive enough to think that if I worked hard and stayed invisible, I would be safe. He cornered me in the barn one evening when I was fetching tools for the next day's work. He touched my face, called me pretty, told me I should be grateful for his attention because mulatto babies brought more money. I stood frozen, unable to speak or move. My whole body turned to stone with terror. And then old James, who worked in the stables, walked in carrying a saddle that needed mending. Mr. Gaines stepped back, adjusted his hat, told me to hurry up with those tools. Old James didn't say a word, but after Mr. Gaines left, he looked at me and said, "Stay near people, girl. Don't never be alone where he can find you." I followed that advice for years. Stayed in groups, timed my movements, made myself less available, less accessible. And when I got pregnant anyway, not by Mr. Gaines, but by Thomas, a young man from a neighboring plantation who I loved in the desperate way you love when love is forbidden and doomed, I was almost relieved because pregnant women and new mothers were usually left alone. Until I lost her. Until my body became available again. A tool returned to service. I remember teaching myself not to hope. Hope is dangerous here. Hope makes you vulnerable. If you hope for freedom and it doesn't come, the disappointment can kill you as surely as a whip. If you hope for love and it's taken away, the grief can break you beyond repair. If you hope for basic kindness and receive only cruelty, you start to believe you deserve the cruelty, that something is wrong with you rather than with the world. So I learned to live without hope, to simply exist in each moment without expecting anything beyond it. Wake up. Work. Eat if there is food. Sleep if there is time. Wake up again. Repeat. Do not think about tomorrow. Do not remember yesterday with too much detail. Just survive this moment, and then the next one, quietly, carefully, invisibly. The turning point comes on a Tuesday in August, when the heat presses down like a physical weight, like a hand against the throat of the world, and the air shimmers with moisture that never becomes rain. The temperature must be near 100 degrees, and we have been in the field since before sunrise, our hands bleeding from the sharp edges of cotton bolls, our backs screaming from the constant bending and reaching. The water breaks are short and insufficient. Mr. Gaines watches us like a hawk, counting our baskets, calculating our worth, finding fault everywhere he looks. His mood is particularly foul today. We heard through the kitchen staff that he lost money gambling in town, that his wife is leaving him, that he has debts he cannot pay. His troubles become our pain. That is how it works. We absorb their anger, their frustration, their failures, and we bleed for them. I am working beside Ruth, who is 16 years old and 6 months pregnant with a child everyone knows is Mr. Gaines's, though no one will ever say it aloud. Ruth is struggling today, moving slowly, one hand pressed against her swollen belly, her face pale and drawn. She is barely keeping up with her quota, and I have been quietly adding cotton from my own basket to hers when no one is looking, trying to protect her, trying to keep her safe. But Mr. Gaines is watching. He is always watching. He calls her name, his voice cutting across the field like a blade. Ruth, get over here. She walks to him slowly, fearfully, her head down, her shoulders hunched. I can see her trembling from where I stand. He starts yelling at her, calling her lazy, worthless, a waste of food and space. He says she is deliberately working slowly to spite him. He says she needs discipline. He says she needs to learn her place. And then he raises his whip, and I see the arc of it, see the trajectory, see exactly where it will land. Across her stomach, across the child she did not choose to carry, across the evidence of his own crime. And something in me, something I thought I had buried years ago, something I believed had died with my own daughter in the cold ground beyond the quarters, breaks through the surface like a tree root through stone. I do not think. Thinking would stop me. I simply move, stepping out of my row, crossing the space between us, placing myself between Ruth and the descending whip. It catches me across the shoulder and upper back, a line of fire that steals my breath and sends lightning through my entire body. The pain is extraordinary, clarifying, almost purifying. I gasp but do not cry out. Mr. Gaines stares at me, his face frozen in shock. In 8 years on this plantation, I have never stepped out of line. I have never spoken back. I have never interfered. I have never been anything but perfectly obedient, perfectly invisible, perfectly quiet. And now I am standing here, very visible, having to fight a direct action by the overseer in front of 30 witnesses. What the hell do you think you're doing? His voice is low, dangerous, more frightening than his yelling. I can feel every eye in the field on me. I can feel Ruth trembling behind me. I can feel my mother's voice in my head. Be small, Evelyn. Be quiet. Lived, but for the first time in 14 years, I hear another voice too. My own voice, saying, "But what kind of life? What kind of survival is this? And for what? To die anyway, worn out and used up, having never stood for anything? She's carrying a child, sir," I say, and my voice does not sound like my own. It sounds like someone who has been silent too long, someone whose voice is rusty from disuse but still works, still carries meaning. You wouldn't whip a mare in foal. You wouldn't damage livestock that's breeding. Sir, the comparison is deliberate. I am speaking his language, the only language he understands, the language of property and value and economic calculation. I am not appealing to his mercy or his humanity, because he has neither. I am appealing to his self-interest, to the mathematics of slavery that say a child, even a mixed-race child, even a child born of rape, is still worth money, still an asset, still something to be preserved. For a long moment that stretches like taffy, he stares at me, and I think he will kill me right here, right now, in front of everyone. I think he will make an example of me so brutal that no one will ever dare to challenge him again. But then something changes in his expression. He sees the other workers watching, frozen in their rows, witnesses to this moment. He sees how still everyone has become, how the entire field has stopped breathing. He sees old James near the water barrel, standing straighter than usual. He sees Samuel, still scarred from his own whipping, with his hands clenched at his sides. He sees the mathematics of it. One troublesome field hand against the potential loss of a child, against the risk of other slaves seeing him destroy valuable property out of anger, against the possibility of this story spreading to other plantations and reaching Master Calloway's ears. The master does not like waste. The master does not like overseers who let emotion interfere with profit. And Mr. Gaines, for all his cruelty, is not stupid. He lowers the whip slowly, deliberately. His face is red with rage, but his voice is controlled when he speaks. Get back to work, all of you. And you, he points the whip at me. Your rations are cut by half for a week. You'll make up Ruth's quota along with your own. If either of you falls behind, you'll both get what's coming. Understand? Yes, sir. My voice is steady, though my whole body is shaking. I understand. Get back to work. He bites off each word like he is chewing leather. I turn back to my row, my hands shaking so badly I can barely grasp the cotton. The welt across my back and shoulder burns like I have been branded. Ruth whispers thank you so quietly I almost do not hear it, but I do not respond. I cannot, because I have done the one thing I swore I would never do. I have been seen. I have been heard. I have defied. And I do not know yet what it will cost me, but I know the cost will come. It always does. The rest of the day passes in a blur of pain and cotton and the weight of eyes on me. Some of the glances are fearful. I have broken the unspoken rules, and they worry about what punishment might extend to all of us. But some of the glances are different. Sarah, who is 40 years old and has survived 3 different masters, catches my eye and gives the smallest nod. James brings me water without being asked, holding the dipper to my lips because my hands are shaking too badly. Samuel works closer to my row than usual, as if his presence might offer some protection. And Ruth stays near me, her young face filled with a gratitude and hope that terrifies me, because hope is dangerous, and I have given her some whether I meant to or not. That night in the cabin, the others treat me differently. Sarah brings me extra cornbread wrapped in cloth, pressing it into my hands without a word. Liza, who works in the big house and rarely speaks to us field workers, tends the welt on my back with grease and torn cloth, her touch gentle. The children stare at me with wide eyes, like I am something new and unfamiliar. And old James, sitting by the small fire, says quietly, "Your mama would be proud, girl. You stood up. You stood up when it mattered." His words break something open inside me, something I have kept sealed tight for years. I do not cry, I have forgotten how, but I feel the crack, feel something shifting in my chest like a bone resetting after a break. I have spent 14 years trying to be invisible, and in one moment, I became the most visible person on this plantation. And I am terrified, but I am also, for the first time in longer than I can remember, awake. Fully awake, present in my own life rather than just surviving through it. The consequences unfold slowly over the following weeks, like blood spreading through water, staining everything it touches. Mr. Gaines does not come for me immediately. That would be too obvious. Too much like admitting I was right to intervene. Too much like acknowledging that a slave woman had successfully challenged his authority. Instead, he makes my work harder in ways that seem almost accidental, almost random, but are clearly deliberate to anyone paying attention. He assigns me the worst sections of the field, the rows full of thorns and rocks where the cotton is sparse and hard to reach. He cuts my rations as promised, then finds excuses to cut them further. I was late to the field one morning, I was not. I talked during work hours, I did not. I showed disrespect in my posture, impossible to disprove. He watches me constantly with those pale eyes, waiting for me to fail, to falter, to give him justification for the punishment he wants to deliver. But something has changed, and it is not just in him. It is in me. It is in the way I move through the world now, no longer trying to be invisible, but simply being myself, still careful, still strategic, but no longer erasing myself moment by moment. It is in the way the other women look at me now, not with pity or fear, but with recognition, with solidarity, with something that might be the beginning of collective strength. Sarah starts working near me in the fields, her presence a quiet form of protection. When my rations are cut, she shares hers. When I am assigned impossible quotas, she and others quietly add to my basket when Mr. Gaines is not looking. When I am too exhausted to stand after 18 hours of work, they help me to the cabin and tend my hands and back. Ruth stays close to me constantly, as if my presence offers protection, and perhaps it does. Mr. Gaines has not touched her since that day, has not called her to the barn, has barely looked at her. The child in her belly continues to grow, and she works as much as she is able, and I watch over her like a mother hen, ready to step between her and harm again, if necessary. She tells me one night that she has decided to name the baby Eve, if it is a girl, after me. Evelyn to Eve, a shortening that makes me both honored and heartbroken, because this child will be born into the same bondage, will face the same horrors, will need to learn the same terrible lessons about survival. Even Samuel, still healing from his whipping, begins to treat me differently. He works near me when he can, and sometimes, very quietly, he sings those forbidden songs, and I realize he is singing them for me as a gift, as an acknowledgement, as a form of resistance we are now sharing. One evening, as we walk back from the fields in the purple twilight, he says to me, "You know what you did changes things. Not everything, not enough, but something." I do not know how to respond to this, so I say nothing, but I hear the words and I understand them. Something has shifted in the invisible networks of resistance that exist beneath the surface of plantation life. By standing up once, I have given others permission to imagine standing up too. This is powerful. This is dangerous. This is terrifying. This is hope, and I remember why I taught myself not to hope. Master Calloway notices the change too, though he cannot name exactly what has shifted. He visits the quarters more often, stands watching us with his arms crossed and his silver-topped cane in hand, trying to identify the source of the subtle restlessness he senses. He preaches longer at the Sunday services he forces us to attend, going on about obedience and contentment and God's natural order and the curse of Ham, and all the scripture that men like him twist into justification for owning other human beings. He brings in a second overseer, a man named Tucker who is older than Gaines and meaner, with tobacco-stained teeth and scars across his knuckles that speak of violence as his first language. The surveillance increases. The punishments become more frequent for smaller infractions. They are trying to tighten control because they sense it slipping, and their fear manifests as increased cruelty, which is the only response they know. I begin to understand something I never fully grasped before, that survival and life are not the same thing, and I have been confusing them for years. I have survived, kept my body alive, kept myself functioning, kept breathing and working and existing. But I have not been living. I have been a ghost, a shadow, a hollow thing shaped like a woman. And that moment in the field when I stepped between Ruth and the whip was the first moment in 14 years when I was fully alive, fully present, fully myself. The cost has been high, higher rations cut, harder work, constant surveillance, the knowledge that Mr. Gaines is waiting for any excuse to destroy me. But there is also something gained that is harder to quantify, the feeling of being human again, of mattering, of having made a choice that was mine, not dictated by fear or survival instinct, but by something deeper, something like conscience or courage or care. The other slaves begin to seek me out in small ways. Sarah tells me about the daughter she had before she came here, sold away at age 5, now 13 years old, if she is still alive. Sarah has not spoken this daughter's name aloud in years, but she tells me now, Mercy. Her name was Mercy. And Sarah cries as she says it, and I hold her while she weeps, and this is a kind of resistance too, remembering, naming, grieving, refusing to forget those we have lost. Liza tells me about the reading she has been teaching herself, stealing moments with the master's discarded newspapers, sounding out words letter by letter, building a secret knowledge that could get her killed if discovered. She shows me how to recognize my own name in writing, Evline, 7 letters that spell me, that prove I exist beyond their record-keeping and their bills of sale. Ruth tells me her dreams for baby Eve, dreams that sound impossible, but that we nurse together like fragile flames that must be protected from the wind. She dreams the child will be freed someday. She dreams the child will learn to read. She dreams the child will know her own name and her mother's name and her grandmother's name, a lineage preserved rather than erased. I do not tell Ruth these dreams are unlikely. I do not crush her hope with the weight of reality. Instead, I listen, and I add my own small hopes to hers, and together we imagine a world different from this one, even though we know we will probably never see it. Old James tells me stories at night, tales passed down from his grandmother, who was brought over from Africa on a slave ship, stories about a place where Black people were free, where they ruled kingdoms and built cities and controlled their own destinies. He does not know if these stories are true or just legends, myths we tell ourselves to survive, but he says the truth does not matter as much as the telling. We got to remember we was something before they made us this, he says. We got to remember we human, we got history, we got dignity, they can't take no matter how hard they try. His words plant seeds in my mind, ideas about who I was before slavery tried to define me, who I might be if I could choose for myself. I start to pay attention to things I ignored before, small acts of resistance happening all around me that I was too focused on my own survival to notice. The way the field workers sing in code, their songs carrying messages about escape routes and safe houses. The way the house slaves share information overheard from the master's conversations, intelligence that might help someone someday. The way we slow our work just enough to cost the master profit without earning punishment. The way we steal small amounts of food not out of hunger alone, but as a reclamation of what our labor has earned. The way we preserve our names and our stories and our songs despite all efforts to strip these things away. We are resisting constantly, quietly, in 1,000 small ways. I have been part of this resistance through my survival, but now I am choosing it consciously, and that makes all the difference.
Winter comes to East Texas with unusual cold, the kind of bitter wind that cuts through our thin clothes and makes the mornings an agony of numb fingers and shaking bodies. The work continues regardless of weather. Cotton must be processed, fields must be prepared for next year's planting, fences must be mended, animals must be tended. We work in the cold until our hands crack and bleed, until our bodies are so exhausted that sleep is not rest, but simply unconsciousness, a temporary escape from pain. Master Calloway does not increase our rations for winter. The thin blankets we were given years ago have holes and wear thin. The cabin where we sleep has gaps in the walls where wind whistles through. Several of the children develop coughs that rattle in their chests like stones. Old James's hands become so arthritic he can barely grip tools, but he works anyway because not working means no food. This is winter for slaves. Survival becomes even more precarious, even more tenuous, even more exhausting. Ruth's baby comes in December, 2 weeks before Christmas, on a night when frost covers the ground and our breath fogs the air. Her labor is long and hard, and I stay with her through all of it, holding her hand, wiping her face, encouraging her when she wants to give up. Sarah assists with the birth, her experienced hands guiding the child into the world. When the baby finally comes, sliding into Sarah's waiting hands with a cry that sounds like pure fury, I feel something break open in my chest. She is tiny, perfect, with Ruth's features and skin the color of honey, lighter than her mother's, evidence of her father's violation written on her body in a way she will never be able to hide. Ruth weeps when she holds her, but they are not tears of only joy. They are complex tears, holding love and grief and fear and hope all at once. Her name is Eve. Ruth says, looking at me, "Eve Turner, after you, if that's all right, because you stood up, because you showed me that standing up is possible." I am honored and destroyed by this gift. My name will continue now, carried by this child, but I also know what awaits her. The same life her mother has lived, the same life I have lived, the same suffering and degradation and hopelessness unless something changes. But I accept the honor. I hold baby Eve and I whisper promises to her that I do not know if I can keep. You are loved. You are valued. You are more than what they say you are. You are human. You matter. I will protect you as long as I can. The baby's birth softened something in the quarters. Even people who were wary of me after my confrontation with Mr. Gaines now approach with more openness. They see me with baby Eve and they see care, tenderness, protection. They see Ruth's trust in me and they add their own. I become, without intending it, a kind of anchor point for the community, someone people come to with problems, with fears, with questions. Sarah asks my opinion on how to handle a situation with one of the house slaves. James asks if I think Samuel should risk singing again, now that his back has healed. Liza asks if I think she should keep learning to read, or if the risk is too great. I do not have answers to these questions. I am 23 years old. I have no wisdom beyond what suffering has taught me. I am barely surviving myself, but I listen, and apparently that is enough. Listening is its own form of care, its own form of resistance. Mr. Gaines watches all of this with growing anger. He sees his control slipping, sees the way the slaves defer to me in small ways, sees the community forming around something he cannot quite identify, but definitely cannot allow. One evening in January, he corners me behind the smokehouse, in the blue twilight when most people are at dinner and the space feels private. "You think you're special," he says, his voice low and venomous. "You think that little performance in the field made you something more than what you are. But you're not. You're property, same as always. And I will break you for what you did. I will make you sorry you ever opened your mouth." I look at him, really look at him, not down at the ground as I've been trained to do, and I see not a monster, but a deeply small man. A man who needs us to be less than human, so he can feel superior. A man whose entire sense of self is built on a lie. A man who is afraid, though he would never admit it, because people like me are learning not to be afraid, and his power depends on our fear. Winter comes to East Texas with unusual cold, the kind of bitter wind that cuts through our thin clothes and makes the mornings an agony of numb fingers and shaking bodies. The work continues regardless of weather. Cotton must be processed. Fields must be prepared for next year's planting. Fences must be mended. Animals must be tended. We work in the cold until our hands crack and bleed, until our bodies are so exhausted that sleep is not rest but simply unconsciousness, a temporary escape from pain. Master Calloway does not increase our rations for winter. The thin blankets we were given years ago have holes and wear thin. The cabin where we sleep has gaps in the walls where wind whistles through. Several of the children develop coughs that rattle in their chests like stones. Old James's hands become so arthritic he can barely grip tools, but he works anyway because not working means no food. This is winter for slaves. Survival becomes even more precarious, even more tenuous, even more exhausting. Ruth's baby comes in December, 2 weeks before Christmas, on a night when frost covers the ground and our breath fogs the air. Her labor is long and hard, and I stay with her through all of it, holding her hand, wiping her face, encouraging her when she wants to give up. Sarah assists with the birth, her experienced hands guiding the child into the world. When the baby finally comes, sliding into Sarah's waiting hands with a cry that sounds like pure fury, I feel something break open in my chest. She is tiny, perfect, with Ruth's features and skin the color of honey, lighter than her mother's, evidence of her father's violation written on her body in a way she will never be able to hide. Ruth weeps when she holds her, but they are not tears of only joy. They are complex tears, holding love and grief and fear and hope all at once. Her name is Eve. Ruth says, looking at me, "Eve Turner, after you, if that's all right, because you stood up, because you showed me that standing up is possible." I am honored and destroyed by this gift. My name will continue now, carried by this child, but I also know what awaits her. The same life her mother has lived, the same life I have lived, the same suffering and degradation and hopelessness unless something changes. But I accept the honor. I hold baby Eve and I whisper promises to her that I do not know if I can keep. You are loved. You are valued. You are more than what they say you are. You are human. You matter. I will protect you as long as I can. The baby's birth softens something in the quarters. Even people who were wary of me after my confrontation with Mr. Gaines now approach with more openness. They see me with baby Eve and they see care, tenderness, protection. They see Ruth's trust in me and they add their own. I become, without intending it, a kind of anchor point for the community, someone people come to with problems, with fears, with questions. Sarah asks my opinion on how to handle a situation with one of the house slaves. James asks if I think Samuel should risk singing again, now that his back has healed. Liza asks if I think she should keep learning to read, or if the risk is too great. I do not have answers to these questions. I am 23 years old. I have no wisdom beyond what suffering has taught me. I am barely surviving myself, but I listen, and apparently that is enough. Listening is its own form of care, its own form of resistance. Mr. Gaines watches all of this with growing anger. He sees his control slipping, sees the way the slaves defer to me in small ways, sees the community forming around something he cannot quite identify, but definitely cannot allow. One evening in January, he corners me behind the smokehouse, in the blue twilight when most people are at dinner and the space feels private. "You think you're special," he says, his voice low and venomous. "You think that little performance in the field made you something more than what you are. But you're not. You're property, same as always. And I will break you for what you did. I will make you sorry you ever opened your mouth." I look at him, really look at him, not down at the ground as I've been trained to do, and I see not a monster, but a deeply small man. A man who needs us to be less than human, so he can feel superior. A man whose entire sense of self is built on a lie. A man who is afraid, though he would never admit it, because people like me are learning not to be afraid, and his power depends on our fear.
One morning in April, when the cotton plants are just beginning to push through the red earth in tender green shoots, Master Calloway calls all the slaves to gather in front of the big house. This is unusual. We are losing work time, and he values productivity above almost everything else. We stand in ragged lines, exhausted and weary, wondering what new cruelty is about to unfold. He stands on the porch with Mrs. Sarah beside him, and Mr. Gaines stands below with his whip coiled at his belt. Master Calloway clears his throat and announces that he has decided to sell several slaves to settle debts. He reads names from a list. My heart stops when I hear Evelyn. I am being sold. After 8 years on this plantation, I am being sold away, separated from the people who have become my family, sent to some unknown place to start the cycle of survival all over again with strangers. Ruth gasps behind me. Sarah reaches for my hand and squeezes it. I feel the weight of this moment. I am being punished for standing up, for being visible, for refusing to be silent property. This is the cost Mr. Gaines promised, the price I said I would pay. And I am paying it now. But as I stand there, waiting to be loaded onto a wagon with the others being sold, I realize something that surprises me. I am not broken by this. I am devastated. I will miss Ruth and baby Eve, will miss Sarah and Samuel and James and all the others who became my community. I will grieve this loss. But I am not destroyed, because I know now what I did not know before, that I am more than my circumstances, more than my bondage, more than their definitions of me. I stood up once. I protected someone weaker. I chose dignity over safety. And that choice, that moment, that act of defiant humanity, they cannot take it away. It lives in me now, permanent and unshakable. As they load us onto the wagon, 3 women, 2 men, and 1 teenage boy, all being sold to a trader who will take us south, Ruth runs forward with baby Eve in her arms. "Thank you," she says, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for showing me, for teaching me." She holds the baby up so I can kiss her forehead one last time. "I'll tell her about you," Ruth promises. "I'll tell her about Evelyn Turner, who stood up when it mattered. I'll make sure she knows." I nod, unable to speak around the grief in my throat. The wagon begins to move, and I watch the only home I have known for 8 years disappear behind me. I watch Ruth holding baby Eve, Sarah with her arm around Ruth's shoulders, Samuel and James standing together, all of them bearing witness to this separation, all of them changed in small ways by what we shared. And I think about my mother, sold away from me when I was 9, and I understand now what she must have felt, the unbearable pain of separation mixed with the desperate hope that I would survive, that the lessons she taught me would be enough. I do not know what awaits me in whatever place I am being taken. I do not know if I will survive it. I do not know if I will ever be free in the legal sense, if I will ever own my own body and my own time and my own choices. But I know this. I learned to survive quietly, and that survival gave me the strength to eventually survive loudly. I learned that silence has its place, but so does speaking. I learned that being invisible kept me alive, but being visible made me human. I learned that the cost of dignity is high, but the cost of losing yourself is higher. The wagon rolls south on dusty roads, and I am 23 years old, and I am enslaved, and I am being sold like livestock, and I am also somehow, against all odds, free in the only way that matters right now, free in my own heart, free in my own understanding of myself, free in my knowledge that I am human and valuable and worthy, regardless of what their laws say, regardless of what their violence does to my body. They own my labor. They own my time, but they do not own my soul, and they never will. I think of all the women like me, across the South, across history, who have survived quietly and loudly, who have resisted in small ways and large ways, who have preserved their humanity in the face of systematic dehumanization. I think of my mother, wherever she is, and I hope she survived, hope she found moments of dignity, hope she remembered me with love. I think of baby Eve, who will grow up hearing stories about the woman she was named for, who will learn that resistance is possible even in the smallest forms. I think of Ruth and Sarah and all the others still on that plantation, who will continue the work of survival and resistance in whatever ways they can. The sun rises higher in the sky, burning away the morning coolness, and I close my eyes and feel its warmth on my face. I am alive. I am aware. I am Evelyn Turner of Texas, and I learned to survive quietly, but I learned something more important too. I learned to live out loud, even when it cost me everything. I learned that silence can protect you, but speaking can define you. I learned that surviving is not the same as living, and I chose living, and I will keep choosing it day after day until my last breath. And in the end, that is the only freedom that can never be taken away. The freedom to know yourself, to choose yourself, to be yourself, even in chains. I am property in their eyes. But in my own eyes, I am human. I am worthy. I am strong. I am Evelyn Turner, and I learned to survive quietly, but I will not die silently. I learned to survive quietly, so I could learn to live with my voice unbroken.